From a human rights policy perspective, property rights must not be seen in isolation, but coupled with the implementation of other human rights. Property rights contribute to ensuring social harmony and the emergence of an active civil society. At the same time, property rights are closely linked with the issues of refugees and migration, as well as with the restoration of justice and peace following conflicts both between and within states.
Property rights are identity. Property rights are credibility. Property rights are investment. Property rights are finance and credit. Property rights means the possibility of bringing assets together.
Property rights as human rights can only be realized by giving equal importance to all human rights: civil, political, economic, social, and cultural. Mumbai, the gateway to India. Since the 19th century, Mumbai has been the commercial capital of the country, offering opportunity to fortune seekers from far and wide. Its booming economy accounts for 40% of India's foreign trade. Over the past 2 decades, a new economy has taken shape, giving birth to international call centers, financial services, and information technology companies. Real estate prices have soared to record levels, rivaling Tokyo and Hong Kong. Mumbai's 12 million inhabitants live on 440 square kilometers of land, making it one of the most densely populated cities in the world. In the middle of Mumbai lies Dharavi, Asia's largest slum. Home to over 1 million people, Dharavi reflects a somewhat darker reality: poverty, lack of space, and a huge informal economy. People living here have no way of claiming right to property, although they have often lived and worked on the same bit of land for several generations. Without legal entitlement to property, the poor are unable to join the formal economy, and their human rights cannot be guaranteed.
When you come into a country, the first thing they ask you is where you come from. What's your address? I can't even think now of a transaction that takes place legally that doesn't ask you, what's your address? And the question is, can you have a legal address if you don't have a legal property system?
As a leading expert in the area of economic development, Peruvian economist Hernando de Soto has been advocating property rights as a key factor in the empowerment of the poor.
What are the things that hold a society together? Property rights was one of them. It means the creation of a system of rights which keeps society together. Obviously, in developing countries, the existing legislation on property rights does not hold society together, which is the reason that there's such a distance between the poor and the rich.
At the University of Zurich, Francis Cheneval is a professor of political philosophy and theory and publisher with Hernando de Soto of the book Realizing Property Rights. They argue that governments should support the idea of allocating property rights to the poor, thus strengthening society as a whole.
When we say realizing property rights, we mean the social, political and legal systems working together in favor of protecting the property of small property owners especially, who then are taken into the formal sector of the economy and are empowered that way.
Dharavi may be one of the world's largest slums, but it is by far the most prosperous. Despite precarious conditions, Dharavi's economy is flourishing. Hundreds of small-scale industries produce leather goods, garments, pottery and plastic, generating an estimated annual turnover of more than $1 billion. But doing business in the informal economy has its limitations. The absence of a formal legal system creates an insecure environment. Without legal entitlement to property and no effective protection by the law, the very existence of the people of Dharavi is at the mercy of corrupt local leaders and indifferent city authorities. Kavita Thakur runs a garment factory with 20 employees in the middle of Dharavi. She began with nothing, working nights while struggling to earn enough money to send her children to school.
पहले मेरा ऐसा ही प्रॉब्लम था, मैं एक बैंक में जॉब करता था। वो बैंक में ऊपर बैंक था, सामने गारमेंट था। तो जो लेडीज उधर काम करता था ना, वो मेरे पास पैसा जमा करने को आता था। तो बोलता था मैडम आप भी थोड़ा थोड़ा स्टार्ट करो। मैंने थोड़ा बहुत पैसा जमा किया भाई भी लोगों से और स्टार्ट कर दिया। भाड़े की जगह लिया, भाड़े का मशीन लेकर बिजनेस स्टार्ट किया।
Kavita Thakur is the perfect example of somebody who has successfully dealt with the restrictions of the informal economy, making the best out of Dharavi's possibilities.
One should treat the poor as people also looking for opportunity, which does not mean that the poor sometimes don't require special assistance. Of course they do. But let's make sure that they have the same opportunities, because what the poor can do for themselves is so much more than what we can do for them.
Today, Kavita's business is successful, but without an official license, she's pushed into illegality and has no guarantee that she'll be able to keep her business.
सबको तो फेस करना पड़ता है ना। अभी लेडीज बिजनेस करते बोले तो झोपड़पट्टी में क्या रहते, दादा बिदा लोग रहते, उन लोग को भी फेस करना पड़ता है। अपना अगर डेयरिंग रहेगा तो ही वो लोग सताएंगे, नहीं तो वो लोग बहुत सताते। ये दो वो दो, ऐसा करो वैसा करो, हराम का पैसा ले लो, ये सब बहुत बातों को मुंह देना पड़ता है। ये सब हम नहीं देते, देना पड़ता है। हम नहीं किसी में भी डालते, हम हमारे इसमें रहते।
The formal economy is an economy where rights can be enforced according to law. An informal economy is where rights cannot be enforced. And so you have to find out in each case, why is it that people who would want their rights protected, you have to be crazy not to have your rights protected, are not able to have access to the law. And that's where we find out that barriers are enormous, or that sometimes people don't think it's important for the poor. And I think that they're making a big mistake.
Natalal Chauhan lives with his family in Kumbawada, a neighborhood traditionally dedicated to pottery. Despite the unstable conditions in Dharavi, his family has been running their business for over 3 generations.
જ્યારે 1933 માં જે ઘર આપેલા હતા એમાં જ અમે લોકો 4 ભાઈઓ અત્યારે રહીએ છીએ. અમારો આ ત્રીજું જનરેશન એમાં છે. ગ્રાન્ડફાધરે જગ્યા લીધેલી ને અમે લોકો એમાં ને એમાં આજે 20 મેમ્બર થઈ ગયા છે એ જ ઘરમાં.
Natalal and his family are well off by Dharavi standards, but their business is facing one major problem. The financial resources for expansion are out of Natalal's family's reach. And there is one main reason for this.
માર્કેટના કે ઓર્ડરના પેપર હોય તો અમે લોકો બેંક અમને આપી શકે, પણ આનું માર્કેટ નથી, એને કોઈ ઓર્ડર નથી, તો એમને ખાલી પ્રોડક્શન કરવાનું છે તો એનું કોઈ લોન આપે નહીં.
Like Natalal, most of Dharavi's active entrepreneurs suffer from the lack of a legal system and exclusion from the market.
If you don't have a property right, you have nothing to give as a guarantee or to demonstrate your stability if you're going to try and get credit.
So strengthening a property rights system really means to bring people into the formal economy, to give them the possibility to grow in their business, to have access to credit, but also bring them into the formal citizenship. You know, I mean, being a citizen means to be an active part of society, but also to have the protection of that society.
Sheila Patel runs a non-governmental organization which helps communities in slums take action on their collective concerns. This involves creating records of inhabitants who are officially invisible because they have no papers and therefore no legal protection.
Our countries have serious problems of actually doing a documentation of their citizens per se. Most municipalities don't even have a register of land ownership. They don't have registers of properties.
Sheila Patel's organisation provides the slum dwellers with identity cards as a first step in legalising their assets and protecting their rights.
If you're given an identity in the city, then everything moves forward in some way. But if you are invisible in the city, then you cannot claim any of the resources that the city provides to its citizens.
A property right means trust, provided it's a good property right. If it's only a piece of paper that circulates 10 blocks around here between us local shop owners, you're not going to trust it. But imagine that it comes with a seal of the government that is recognized by law and it has all the legitimacy, trust. So trust comes from law.
In Dharavi, land is a precious good. But since most of the inhabitants of Dharavi don't own the land on which their houses are built, they cannot claim the right to property. Building a house in such conditions is a risky business, as Ali Mohammed Katia explains. Those who are lucky enough to build a shack usually don't own the ground it lies upon. This is why it's vital to include land as an inseparable part of property rights, in order to protect inhabitants from forced evictions.
म्युनिसिपालिटी पैसा अगर खवड़ावा नहीं होए ने कोई आजूबाजू वाला कोई कंप्लेन भी करे तो आवे तोड़ी भी सके छे तोड़ी वया जाए पछे एने पैसा वधारे ले पछे बनी सके छे बाकी आनु कोई हसोटी नहीं कानून नहीं मांगे 5,000 10,000 जे एने जोतो होय ए प्रमाण में एनो कोई नियम नहीं होय.
Lack of security affects individuals and families who have no access to fundamental rights, such as the rights to an adequate standard of living, including adequate food, clothing and housing, and to the continuous improvement of living conditions.
I think that there are governments that don't want the poor to have rights. I think that there are governments on the defensive because they've seen the poor move into the cities and don't want to encourage that and then stop their rights. But I think that in many cases the story is that governments do want to give them rights, but don't know how.
Property rights are crucial to a country's development and can be used as a toolkit to eradicate poverty and strengthen human rights. By granting legal rights, a country can empower its poor, reduce their vulnerability, and allow them to join the legal economy. But property rights need to be realized within a set of rules and laws that take into account all other human rights. If they don't include the right to proper housing, sanitary facilities, among other basic human rights, property rights may turn out to be ineffective. A further threat to human rights in Dharavi is expropriation. City officials are planning to demolish and rebuild all the area, rehousing around 300,000 people in the process. But more than 500,000 people are likely to lose everything they have. Their shops, their homes, their community without any compensation. Deprived of basic human rights such as the right to work and to adequate housing, Dharavi's inhabitants will be faced with new problems. Devidas Taike lives with his mother, his wife and 2 boys and runs a small glove manufacturing business. He is skeptical about the government's plans for Dharavi.
इसलिए हर किसी की नज़र धारावी में है। आदमी बिल्डिंग में फ्लैट देने के बावजूद भी आदमी को जबरदस्ती करके चलो मान लिया रह गया और वो रह नहीं पाएगा। 2 साल 5 साल में वहाँ से निकल के बेच के चला जाएगा, तो वो फिर आम आदमी का क्या? यानी इधर से धारावी डेवलप हो गई, फिर दूसरी जगह फिर नई धारावी बन गई झोपड़पट्टी, तो क्या फायदा है फिर बना के?
In Kumbawada, where the Potters live, insecurity is on the rise. If Natalal and his family get evicted, not only will they lose their homes, their whole existence is likely to be jeopardized.
પ્રોજેક્ટ પ્લાન થઈ ગયો, એ લોકો અમને કુંભાર કામ કરવાની અહીંયા ના પાડે ને ઘર આપે સારા, તો અમને લોકોને તો એ ઘરમાં સારા ઘરમાં જઈને મરવાનું જ રહે ખાલી, કેમ કે અમારો જો ધંધો બંધ થઈ જાય તો અમે અમારા બચાવને અમારા જે ફેમિલી છે એને ભરણ પોષણ કેવી રીતે અમે લોકો કરીએ? એ લોકો અગર આવશે અને કુંભારવાડા તોડવાનું ચાલુ કરે તો અમારે રસ્તા ઉપર આવવું પડશે, આંદોલન કરવું પડશે, ભૂખ હડતાલ કરવી પડશે ને કદાચ એમાં રાઇટ્સ પણ થઈ જાય.
The growing fear of unjustified expropriation will spark confrontation.
તો સવાલ જ નથી આવતો અમે આ જગ્યા છોડીશું નહીં. આ જગ્યા છોડવા માટે અમારો જીવ દેવા બી અમે લોકો તૈયાર થઈશું.
When a clear set of rules and laws is missing, when property documents are not valid, and when there is no protection from the state, human rights are not respected. This leads to tensions which may grow into civil conflict. But such situations can be prevented.
If you have a functioning property rights systems, a lot of conflicts do not occur. And a lot of conflicts that we might think are ethnic conflicts and cultural conflicts, if we go to the bottom of things, we might discover that at the bottom are conflicting property claims. And if they were sorted out legally and in a dignified manner, a lot of conflicts could be prevented.
The idea of having rule of law for everyone, especially the poor, is to give them the right to enforce their rights. The right to enforce rights.
Property rights as human rights can only be realized by giving equal importance to all human rights: civil, political, economic, social, and cultural.